Hello, I'm Morgan and I left a religious cult. So I grew up in North Georgia up until I was age 18. Georgia was a perfect place to, it's very conservative, so the indoctrination and all of that just started very, very early. My family decided to move from Georgia to Washington when I was 18 to join a ministry, which then turned into a cult. My mom heard about this ministry when I was very young. I was about 5 or 6. My mom found this ministry very helpful, and my mom actually threw a conference for this woman and her ministry in Georgia. Her whole basis when she first started her ministry, like back in the 80s or 90s, it was all about how to homeschool your children. So everyone in the ministry is homeschooled because Monroe believes homeschooling is God's way, and the devil is in public school and you can't send your kids to public school. Religion is the number one thing taught in homeschooling. A majority, if not all, curriculum when it comes to homeschooling is Christian based. And then when your parents thought you were done, then you were done with school. So like my family knew about this ministry for a majority of my life, but it wasn't until I was 14 that it got reintroduced because the ministry rebranded. They were living in Washington now. And then 4 years later, my mom felt like our family needed to move up there and be a part of this ministry. My mom already knew this woman and had been following her for years and years. When my family moved up to Washington, my parents became leaders. We had to make sure we were representing our parents because we were representing this woman. All our social media had to be pretty private. For instance, my brother liked anime. He had to hide the anime on his Pinterest board. There was control in almost every aspect of my life. So with being a leader, that meant being a helper to this woman. So this woman's ministry was getting bigger and bigger, like it was growing really fast. And she's only one woman. So the leaders would help on like her online ministry. They would be the ones that would be ministering to these people. This woman also held conferences a lot, like marriage conferences, mom conferences, family conferences, and the leaders would sit at certain tables with the attendees and kind of like lead the discussion. Pretty much anything this woman needed, that's what they did. Even with my parents being leaders, we still had to pay to attend these conferences. With me being a photographer, I did a lot of the photography for this ministry. Me and my siblings and my husband's siblings all did a lot of work that majority of us did not get paid for. So I didn't start realizing that it was becoming a cult until 2020 with the elections and COVID and how this woman, I'm just going to call her Monroe. This woman, Monroe, how I was seeing how she was handling COVID and the elections and the direction she was turning the ministry, where it wasn't even becoming about families or healing or growth. It was becoming about who you vote for. It became very political very fast. And if you didn't adhere to Monroe's political opinions, then there was a public shaming. And I was one of those people because I started questioning the status quo. So I wasn't married yet when all of this happened. I was only 18, but I met my husband through this cult. I found out about him when I was 14 because his mom started writing blog posts on Monroe's website about their family and about everything that Jesus was doing in their family and how amazing all her kids were and what an amazing family they were. From the moment I met him, I was like, I'm going to marry this guy. Like, I don't care how long it takes, I'm going to marry him. And here we are now in Austin, Texas, 8 years later. His mom, his parents are also leaders, but they are Monroe's like second in command. They're like the top leaders. When I saw that they didn't give a about me anymore because I wasn't listening, I wasn't submitting to Monroe. I wasn't submitting to my mother-in-law. I was called a brat. I was called rebellious. My mother-in-law tried to break me and my husband up, all because I was questioning. That's literally all I was doing. I was questioning them on what they were doing. And I got tossed aside, got kicked to the curb. Like I didn't matter to them anymore. And I almost ended up taking my life because of that. And that is what sparked me to move to Austin, Texas. My mom is pretty anti-medication and anti-doctors. And she was very upset with me when I told her I was going to the doctor to potentially get started on some antidepressants and go to therapy. And she was not very supportive of any of those things. Their cure for everything is prayer and essential oils and vitamins and supplements. That's the cure for everything. And that's what my mom wanted me to do. So that had been happening since 2020. And so last June, everything just kind of came to a head. I had already lost my friends. My mother-in-law was trying to break me and my husband up. I was kicked to the curb. Monroe didn't want anything to do with me. My siblings weren't talking to me. My family didn't seem to care about me at all. My mom came over to my house and told me all the things I was doing wrong that I did not ask for. And just for context, the things I was doing wrong was making friends outside of the cult, was being an ally to the LGBTQ community. Those were the things I was doing wrong. It wasn't until after I was hospitalized last June that I realized how deep in it they were, because they communicated to me that they could care less and that it was my fault that I was hospitalized. Once I got out of the hospital, I was like, if I'm gonna live, I'm gonna live the way I want to live. And I packed up my car and I drove down here by myself with my cat. And my husband joined me shortly after that. My husband's relationship with his family, mainly his parents, it's pretty bad. But my husband and I cut off communication with both our parents and majority of both sets of families when we left. I mean, we called it out. We told them all it's a cult and we're getting out. And they did not like that. They got very offended with us for calling it a cult. I didn't have really anything when I left. I had my older sister, and my older sister was up there as well with her husband and kids, and she was going through her own thing. She was questioning things, but she wasn't out yet. So I just had her and then two friends I had made at work, which I was slapped on the wrist for having them because they weren't in the cult, and my husband. Once I moved to Austin, and after choosing to live by my terms, all my false personality stuff just kind of faded away, because I no longer had to fit into a box to fit Monroe. I could just be myself. And by being myself, I have found friends here that I call my best friends, even though I haven't even been here a year. Since I've been here, I have nonstop been shooting, modeling. I've been speaking a lot more now, and just pretty much anything creative. That's what I'm doing. I am sharing my story today because I think it is so important to call out abuse, especially when you know that it's happening, and still, like, when it's still happening and no one is talking about it really. And it's like, to some extent, I understand that, because I know what it's like if you start speaking up about it while you're in it. I understand not wanting to speak up about it. But now that I'm on the other side, it's like, I can't sit by and just be silent about this. This ministry took a huge chunk out of my life, and that's time I can't get back.